I was 31 when this started. Late summer, 2002. We did not deploy overseas. That should have warned me. We flew west and landed close to home, but it felt farther than any desert I had known. They took our phones at Fort Bragg. No jokes. No forms. Just a plastic bin and a look that said, "Do not ask." The briefing was short, a red circle on a map of the Appalachians. A place with no town name, just contour lines packed too tight. We were told people went missing there, federal and civilian. Our job was to go in quiet and bring something out. If we found anyone alive, that was secondary. We inserted before dawn. The forest was thick and wet. Cold air rolled downhill and smelled like metal and rain that never fell. My boots sank into mud that showed prints before I stepped. No birds, no bugs. Just a soft tapping sound somewhere far off, slow and patient, like it had time. I remember thinking the mountains were listening. Before we start the video, hit the subscribe button to support the channel. I had been in the Army long enough to know when something was being hidden in plain sight. This felt like that. We were told it was a domestic security support mission, but no one used that phrase out loud. They just said training accident zone and missing contractors. That was the cover. We all heard worse things before and learned not to react. My unit was light infantry, pulled from different platoons, stitched together fast. 8 of us total, no heavy gear. No markings, just rifles, packs, and orders that did not want to be remembered. I was the senior man, staff sergeant. I carried the weight of it before my ruck was even on. 2 of my soldiers were new to me. Good kids, quiet, the kind that still listened more than they spoke. Our medic had done 1 tour already and carried himself like someone who had learned not to expect clean endings. Nobody complained about the mission being stateside, but I saw the looks. Going into mountains instead of across an ocean felt wrong in a way I could not explain. The flight in was short and silent. No one slept. Through the window, I saw long ridges stacked on each other like waves that never broke. The pilot did not talk much. When he did, it was only headings and time. We landed on a small strip that looked unused, but the ground showed signs of weight. Heavy weight, pressed down and lifted off again many times. There were no buildings, just a truck waiting with no markings and a man who checked our names off a list without looking up. We staged for a day. That part bothered me later. If this was urgent, they would have rushed us. Instead, they waited. We were kept in a fenced area near the edge of the forest. No locals came near. No traffic. The woods stood close, like they were leaning in. At night, when things settled, I heard that same tapping sound I had heard on Insertion. Soft. Even. Like metal touching stone. I told myself it was an old line swinging or a loose sign. I did not tell the men. The final brief came from a major I had never seen before. He spoke calmly and did not waste words. He said there was an old underground site ahead, shut down decades ago. Cold War era. The kind built deep and forgotten once the funding dried up. A private group had been working there under a contract that no longer existed. Contact was lost. We were to locate the site, secure a sealed case stored inside, and leave. If we found people, we were to assess and extract if possible. If not, we were to continue the mission. He said the terrain would be difficult. He did not say why maps had been adjusted by hand. We moved out before first light the next morning. Inserted by helicopter into a narrow cut between ridges, the rotors faded fast, swallowed by trees. The ground was damp and cold, even though summer was still holding on. I remember the smell right away, like wet pennies, like old blood washed thin. The air felt heavy in my lungs, not thick, just heavy, like breathing took effort it should not have. We moved slow and careful. Old logging roads led us deeper in. They were clear in places where weeds should have taken over. Something had passed through recently. Not trucks, no tire marks, just flattened brush and pressed earth. We found signs of people leaving in a hurry. A house with lights off, but food still on the table. A radio humming low in the corner, no station coming through. A dog chain tied to a tree, end snapped clean, no blood, no tracks leading away. The forest stayed quiet, not peaceful, just empty. I could hear our breathing and gear. Every step sounded louder than it should. Sometimes I thought I heard movement ahead, but when I stopped, it stopped too. That tapping came back now and then, always far, never close enough to place. It kept a steady pace. When I slowed my steps, it seemed to slow too. I told myself it was my mind playing games. By midday, we reached the ridge marked on our map. There was a fence there, half fallen, with warning signs that did not match any standard I knew. Symbols worn down, words scratched out. Beyond it, set into rock, was a concrete structure like an intake or vent. Part of it had collapsed inward, leaving a dark opening that breathed out cold air. The smell was stronger there, metal and damp stone. That was when I knew this was not just a search. Someone had been here recently, fresh locks on old doors, new cables running into old concrete, power where there should have been none. This place was supposed to be dead, but it was being kept alive in one small corner. I gathered the men and gave simple orders. We would move in tight, mark our path, keep radio use short, watch each other. No hero moves. Everyone nodded. No one joked. The mountain felt closer now, like it was pressing in on us, waiting to see what we would do next. We staged outside the opening longer than I liked. The cold air flowing out of the concrete mouth did not match the day. It felt like winter breath, steady and calm. I checked watches and spacing, then let us in. The first steps down were narrow and slick, old stairs worn smooth. The walls sweated water that smelled sharp, like rust and stone mixed together. Our lights cut short tunnels ahead of us. Beyond that was black that felt thick, like it had weight. The deeper we went, the clearer it became this place had not been abandoned, the way we were told. Some sections were dark and broken, cables torn out, ceiling tiles fallen and crushed under old boots. Other sections were clean. Too clean. Floors swept, handrails wiped, new locks hanging on doors that were older than me. Someone had walked these halls recently and knew exactly which parts mattered. I kept track of time and distance in my head. That is what keeps you steady when things feel wrong. We moved for maybe 20 minutes, but it felt longer. Sound behaved strange down there. A dropped pebble echoed once, then died too fast. Our footsteps sounded close even when spread out. The tapping was back. Faint, not echoing. Direct. Like it was happening in the walls themselves. I stopped twice to listen. Each time it stopped with me. We found the first bodies in an office space. 2 men, civilian clothes, no wounds. Just sitting in chairs, heads tilted like they had nodded off. Skin pale. Eyes open, no sign of struggle. The medic checked them anyway. Cold. Gone for days. He said their faces looked calm, but his hands shook when he stood back up. I told everyone to keep moving. Standing still felt dangerous. Further in, the layout began to drift. Not in a big way. Just small things. A door we passed showed up again later on the other side of a junction. The mark we left on the wall looked smeared, like someone had brushed it with a wet hand. My compass started to spin near one corridor, then settled when we backed away. I blamed old metal and tried not to let it show on my face. We reached the wing that still had power. Lights hummed overhead, clean white glow. Equipment sat in rows, covered but cared for, old machines wired into newer boxes. Recording gear. Thick cables running into the floor and walls. This was not weapons work. This was testing, measuring, listening. We found logs, but pages were missing, torn out clean. Hard drives gone. Labels scraped off. Someone had taken the story, but left the bones. In a secured room at the far end, we found the case. Heavy, lead-lined, sealed tight. Stenciled markings painted over and repainted again. Next to it was a field recorder with a date range that ended recently. I did not play it yet. Something told me not to. We also found one living man in that room, tied to a chair. He looked thin and tired, but not hurt. His eyes followed us too smoothly. He did not speak at first, just breathed slow and even, like he was matching something we could not hear. When he finally talked, his voice was calm, too calm. He said the place reacted to sound. Steps, breath, metal. He said if you made the right pattern, it answered back. He tried to hum under his breath, and the tapping answered him, closer now, like a reply. I shut him up fast and ordered silence. My skin crawled, but I kept my voice level. Soldiers watch your tone more than your words. That was when I realized we were late. Whatever this operation was meant to stop had already moved forward, and we were not the only ones sent to deal with it. Somewhere deeper in the mountain, I heard boots that were not ours. Measured, confident, coming closer. The sound of those other boots settled in my chest before my mind caught up. It was not rushed, not careful either. Just steady movement, like men who knew the ground would not betray them. I pulled my team in close and killed most of our lights. The powered wing stayed bright behind us, casting long shadows down the hall. The tapping grew clearer there, no longer distant. It matched the pace of my heart, then slipped out of sync like it was testing me. The men who came into view were not lost contractors. They wore gear like ours, but cleaner, newer, no unit patches. Faces calm, rifles carried low but ready. They did not look surprised to see us. That told me everything. Their leader held a folder under one arm, paper inside, like this was an office visit and not the inside of a buried mountain. He spoke quietly and said our job was done. He said they would take it from here. His eyes moved to the case without asking. I refused, not loud, not angry, just firm. That is when I saw my name on the top page of his folder. Already typed, already signed by someone above both of us. We were never meant to brief out of this. We were meant to disappear into reports and footnotes. The tapping changed then. Faster, sharper, like metal fingernails on stone. The living civilian began to shake. He pressed his lips together to stop humming, but the sound leaked out anyway, thin and broken. The floor vibrated under our boots, just enough to feel, not enough to knock you off balance. One of my newer soldiers whispered my name without meaning to. The lights flickered once. Just once. That was enough. The shooting started close and ugly. No long exchanges. No clear lines. Sound bounced wrong in those halls. Muzzle flashes felt too bright. Rounds sparked off rails and cabinets. I felt a hard punch in my calf as a piece of metal bit deep. Pain came late, dull and spreading. I dragged myself behind a console and kept firing in short bursts, counting each round. The tapping became a pounding now. Not loud, but everywhere, like it was inside the walls and inside my head at the same time. Men shouted without meaning to. The civilians screamed when the vibration surged and dust fell from the ceiling like dry snow. One of the other team went down hard, not hit, just dropped, hands over his ears, eyes wide like he was seeing something behind his own eyes. The medic crawled to me and tied off my leg with steady hands, his face pale but focused. I remember thinking how tired he looked. We broke contact by moving, not by winning. Forward, not back, deeper, then up, following old emergency arrows that should not still glow. The hall shifted just enough to confuse us. A turn that should have led out fed us back past the same broken door. Our markings smeared again. The compass spun useless. The tapping slowed, then matched our steps again, like it was pleased. One of my men vanished in a straight corridor. No side rooms, no noise. One moment he was there. Next moment only his rifle lay on the floor, still warm. We searched for seconds that felt like minutes, then I forced us to move. Standing still felt like surrender. The air smelled stronger now, sharp and metallic, filling my nose until it tasted like blood. Somewhere above us, something shifted. The mountain itself seemed to settle, like a chest-drawing breath. And we kept moving toward daylight that felt farther away with every step. We came out of the underground through a service exit that should have been sealed. The door was bent outward, like something had pushed its way through from inside. Cold air rushed past us and turned into fog the moment it touched the trees. Dawn was breaking, but the light felt thin, stretched, like it had to work to reach the ground. I limped hard now. Every step pulled fire up my leg, but stopping was not an option. The men stayed close without me asking. They knew. The forest did not sound right. Birds screamed all at once, then cut off like someone threw a switch. The fog hugged the ground and did not move with the wind. It clung to our boots and calves, leaving damp marks that looked like we had walked through ash. I checked our position against the map again. The terrain matched, but distances did not. Ridges that should have taken minutes took half an hour. Slopes felt steeper on the way down than up. The tapping followed us out here too, softer now, spaced wider apart, like it was conserving itself. The civilian stumbled along between two of my men. His eyes stayed forward. He hummed again without knowing it, the same broken pattern. Every time he did, the fog thickened around us. I told him to stop. He tried. His jaw shook. He said the sound helped keep it calm. I did not ask what it was. I did not want him to explain it in words that would stick in my head. We heard rotors in the distance. Relief hit hard and fast, then slipped away just as quick. The sound circled but never came closer. Our radio crackled to life, and a voice came through asking for our sit rep. It was my voice. Same tone, same words I had planned to say, but had not yet spoken. The men looked at me. I said nothing and shut the radio off. My hands shook for the first time. We pushed toward the marked extraction point. When we reached it, the ground was torn up, pressed flat like something massive had landed there and lifted off again. No tracks. No marks that made sense, just pressure. I popped smoke anyway. It fell instead of rising, sinking into the fog and vanishing. That was when the other team stepped out from the trees behind us, weapons low but ready. Faces calm like this was the expected ending. Their leader told me to hand over the case and the civilian. He said we had done our part. He said everything else would be taken care of. I looked at my men, one gone underground, one bleeding inside, one staring too long at the fog. I understood then that if we handed it over, none of this would ever stop. It would just move somewhere else, deeper, quieter. I made a decision that felt heavier than my rifle. I set the charges from our breaching kit on part of the case, shielding what I could not destroy. I gave the order and turned my face away. The blast did not sound right. It folded inward, like air rushing into a hole. The tapping stopped all at once. The fog shuddered and began to lift in thin strips. Wind returned. Real wind. Gunfire followed, sharp and human. We fought just long enough to break contact. When the extraction finally came, it was not on our channel and not with our call sign. Different aircraft, different men. Clean uniforms, empty eyes. They took the civilian without a word. They took our notes. They told us what story we would tell. As we lifted off, I looked down at the trees pulling away and felt the mountain grow quiet behind us, like something had gone back to sleep, waiting. We did not talk on the flight out. The noise of the aircraft felt wrong after so much quiet. Too loud, too normal. My leg throbbed in time with the engines, and every beat reminded me that I was still there and others were not. One of my men kept rubbing his hands together like he could not feel them. The medic stared at the floor the whole way, lips pressed tight, eyes moving as if he was counting something only he could see. Back on base, everything moved fast. Faster than it should. No welcome. No questions. We were split up within an hour. Medical checks done by people who did not wear name tapes. My wound was cleaned and closed without comment. No pain meds offered, just a note written and taken away. When I asked about my missing soldier, the answer came too quick. Training accident. Listed as lost in rugged terrain. Search suspended. That was the phrase. Suspended. Like a body hanging in air. The story they gave us was clean and empty. A routine exercise. A collapse underground. Equipment failure. We were told to memorize it, not read it. They made us sign papers that did not explain much but warned of consequences in simple words. I have signed many things in my life. None felt heavier than that pen. The tapping did not stop after we left the mountains. That was the first sign it was not tied to place alone. I heard it in the quiet room they put me in that night. Soft, steady. When I held my breath, it slowed. When I shifted in the bed, it changed pace. I told myself it was stress. I had lost men before. This was how it showed itself. That is what I wanted to believe. Days passed, then weeks. The unit moved on. The Army always does. One name vanished from the board. Another was marked deceased after a delay. No body recovered. I noticed small things that did not line up. Soil in my boots that did not match any range. Red dust that smelled faintly of metal. A recorded call in my voicemail that was just breathing and a faint tap in the background, sent from my own number. I tried to put it behind me. Focus on routine, training, paperwork. But sometimes, when things went quiet, I felt the floor answer back. Not loud, just a pressure under my feet like a memory shifting. And I knew then that breaking the case had not ended anything. It had only changed its shape. The real truth came to me slowly, not in one clear moment. It came in pieces that did not ask permission. A report I was not meant to see left open on a desk, a contractor name that showed up in a budget line for acoustic research. Old Cold War files marked obsolete but still drawing money. I began to understand that the place in the mountains was not a mistake. It was a tool. They were not studying weapons or signals in the way we understood. They were mapping response, how sound moved through stone, how pressure built and held, how patterns could be stored and released. The mountain was part of it, but not the whole thing. The thing inside listened. It learned rhythm. It answered what it was given, not with thought, but with force. The civilian we handed over had not been a victim. He had been a handler, or maybe a listener, someone who learned how to keep it calm. When we removed him and damaged the core, the balance broke. That was why the woods reacted, why the fog moved wrong, why one of my men vanished without a trace. He had stepped at the wrong time, breathed at the wrong moment, and the place had taken him like an echo being pulled back into a wall. I realized then why we were ordered not to discuss it. Not because of panic, because sound spreads, stories spread, patterns repeat. If enough people knew, if enough voices shaped the same idea, it could call something back. Somewhere else, somewhere closer. The tapping still comes some nights, always when the house is quiet, always when my breathing slows. I sit up and wait for it to pass, afraid that if I match it even once, something far away might answer. The breaking point did not come back in the mountains. It came months later when I thought distance and time had dulled everything enough to live with it. I was back in uniform, back in routine, telling myself that whatever we left behind had stayed buried where it belonged. That belief lasted until the night the tapping returned louder than before, not in my head, but in the walls of my house. It started slow, just like it had underground. A soft metal touch, spaced out, patient. I sat up in bed and held my breath. It slowed. When I shifted my weight, it answered back. That was when I knew this was no memory. This was response. My chest tightened in a way training never prepared me for. Fear in a battlefield is sharp and short. This was steady. Watching. Waiting. Over the next days, small things piled up. My radio at work hissed with static that carried faint rhythm. A floor drain at the motor pool vibrated when trucks passed, matching their cadence too closely. The medic for my team stopped answering messages. When I finally tracked him down, he looked thinner, older. He told me he could not sleep anymore. He said when things went quiet, his heart felt like it was not fully inside his chest, like something else was keeping time for it. That was when I understood the truth I had avoided. Destroying part of the case had not ended the operation. It had triggered the next phase. Whatever had been stored in that mountain had learned enough to persist without it. Not move freely, not chase, but echo. Spread through systems already built for sound and pressure. Pipes, tunnels, foundations, places meant to carry vibration without question. I requested leave and drove west without filing a plan. Back toward the ridges we had left behind. I told myself I was going to prove it was over, that the mountain was quiet again, that this thing had no anchor. The closer I got, the stronger the smell became. Wet metal. Cold stone. Even miles away, it sat in the back of my throat like a warning. The road into the old area was blocked, officially closed for environmental reasons. I parked and walked. My leg ached where the shrapnel had been, pain blooming with each step like it remembered the place. The forest felt wrong again. Too still. Fog hung low, even though the weather report said clear skies. The tapping was back, clearer now, leading me uphill like it knew I was coming. I reached the ridge by dusk. The fence was gone, torn down and dragged away. The concrete intake set open wider than before, broken edges fresh. Cold air poured out like breath. I stood there longer than I should have, listening. The sound inside was not random. It was layered. Old patterns. New ones. Some I recognized. Footsteps. Radio clicks. A man's breathing that sounded too much like my own. I realized then that the final mistake had been thinking this was something to escape. It was not hunting us. It was learning us. Every mission, every movement, every sound we had ever made down there was still being played back, tested, adjusted, and now it was calling for more. I stepped inside again because I knew what would happen if someone else did. The deeper I went, the stronger the response became. Dust fell. Walls hummed. The tapping turned into a full rhythm that shook my teeth. I moved slow, controlling my breath, breaking my own patterns on purpose. When I reached the chamber where we had set the charges months before, I saw that something had grown there. Not a shape, not a body, just pressure. Space bent inward, holding sound like a clenched fist. I knew then this was where it ended, one way or another. I stayed still for a long time inside that chamber. Stillness felt like the only weapon left. The air pressed in from all sides, heavy and cold, carrying that same wet metal smell. Every small movement sent a ripple through the space, like sound touching water. I could feel it noticing me. Not seeing, feeling. I slowed my breathing until my chest barely moved. The tapping softened, stretched out, uncertain. It did not like gaps. It wanted rhythm. It wanted order. I remembered the civilian then, the way he hummed without knowing. The way he said it helped keep it calm. He had not been controlling it. He had been feeding it just enough to keep it from pushing back. We had taken that away. I understood now that force alone would not finish this. Breaking things had only made it louder in other places. I reached into my pack and pulled out the recorder we had shielded from the blast months before. I had kept it without telling anyone. A quiet failure, or maybe a planned one. My hand shook as I powered it on. The room reacted at once. Pressure built. Dust lifted from the floor and hung in the air like it forgot how to fall. I did not play the full recording. I played silence first. A clean break. The tapping stumbled. Then I layered in noise, but wrong noise, broken timing. Footsteps that stopped mid-beat. Breathing that skipped and dragged. Radio static cut into uneven pieces. I fed it disorder, the kind that could not settle. The walls shuddered. The pressure flexed inward, then outward, like a lung that could not decide how to breathe. Pain flared in my leg and up my spine as the space fought back. I dropped to one knee and stayed there, teeth clenched, eyes fixed on nothing. The sound around me rose, not louder, but wider, filling every corner until it felt like my head would split. Then something changed. The rhythm collapsed. The tapping lost its place. The chamber sagged, just a little, like something finally letting go. I knew I did not have much time. I set the remaining charges where the pressure felt strongest, not aiming to destroy, but to fracture, to scatter what had been held together too long. I armed them and backed away, slow and careful, breaking my own pattern with every step. When the blast came, it was not violent. It was a deep inward pull, followed by a rush of air that knocked me flat and drove the breath from my lungs. When I woke, I was outside. Dawn light filtered through trees that finally moved with the wind. Birds called, uncertain at first, then steady. The smell was gone. My ears rang, but underneath it was quiet. Real quiet, the kind that does not watch you. I limped back down the ridge and did not look back. No one stopped me. No aircraft came. No men with clean uniforms waited. The mountain stayed still behind me, like a scar that had finally closed, not healed, but sealed enough to leave alone. I reported nothing. There was no one left to report to who would hear it the right way. The tapping faded over weeks, then months. It still comes sometimes, very soft, when the world goes silent and my breathing slows too much. When it does, I change my rhythm. I move. I remind it I am not part of its pattern anymore. The Army eventually let me go. Medical reasons. Old injury, stress. They were not wrong. I built a life that stays loud enough to keep echoes away. I never go back to those mountains. I do not need to. Some things are not meant to be studied or stored. Some things only want to listen. And if you let them learn you too well, they never really forget. Life did not snap back into place after that. It eased, slow and uneven, like a joint learning how to move again after being set wrong. I turned in my gear a few months later. The paperwork said medical separation, chronic pain, sleep disorder, adjustment issues. All true, just not complete. No one asked detailed questions. No one wanted a long story. I was grateful for that. I moved away from base housing and into a small place where the walls were thin and the neighborhood never fully slept. Traffic noise, dogs barking, distant trains at night. It helped. Silence had become something I did not trust. When things were too quiet, my body stayed alert, waiting for a pattern to form. I learned to keep a fan running, a radio on low, anything to break the stillness before it broke me. The men from my team scattered. One transferred units and never reached out again. One took a contractor job overseas. The medic checked in once, months later, just to say he was doing better. He did not say how. I did not ask. We both knew some things were safer left without words. One name stayed on my mind more than the others. The soldier who vanished in that straight hallway. No letter ever came to his family that explained anything, just a folded flag and careful language. Every so often, I noticed signs that the operation had not been erased completely. A research program quietly shut down. A budget line zeroed out. A contractor company dissolving and reforming under a new name. These things happened far above my level, but patterns stand out once you learn how to see them. It felt less like victory and more like a pause agreed upon by people who did not want to push their luck. My leg healed wrong. Cold weather still wakes it up. When it does, the ache carries memory with it. The smell comes back sometimes too, faint but clear, wet metal, stone. It never lasts long. I stand up, I walk around, I change my breathing until my body remembers where it is. I never spoke about the mountains to anyone who did not already know. Not out of fear of consequences, but out of respect for the weight of it. Some stories spread more than they should. Some sounds carry farther than you think. If what we dealt with truly ended, then quiet is part of keeping it that way. Still, I keep watching my own small ways. I listen for changes in rhythm, in buildings, in tunnels, in places where sound gathers and waits. Old habits die hard. Soldier habits die hardest of all. Time did what it always does. It put space between the sharp edges. Not enough to forget, but enough to function. Years passed. I learned new routines. Civilian work, quiet mornings, evenings that ended when I chose, not when orders said so. I stopped flinching at every sudden noise. Mostly. Some habits stayed because they worked. I still note exits. I still listen to how a room sounds before I settle in it. Once in a while, something small would remind me. A tunnel on the highway that felt longer than it should. A building where footsteps echoed back wrong. A hum in the pipes of an old apartment that matched a rhythm I wished I did not recognize. When that happened, I left. No argument with myself. No proving I was fine. I trusted the instinct. It had kept me alive before. I never returned to the Appalachians. Not even to nearby towns. I did not need to see the place again to know it was still there. Mountains do not forget what is buried inside them. They just learn how to hold it better. I believe the fractures we caused scattered whatever pattern had been forming, broke it into pieces too weak to answer back the way it once did. But I do not believe it was destroyed. Things like that rarely are. Sometimes I think about the order we were given. Not to discuss, not to write, not to remember too clearly. At the time, I thought it was about control, about hiding mistakes. Now I understand it was also about safety. Sound carries. Stories shape rhythm. Attention gives form. Silence, used right, can star something before it grows teeth again. I live a normal life now. As normal as anyone who has worn a uniform and come back different can manage. I sleep with noise in the room. I keep my breathing uneven when the night gets too still. I do not hum. I do not tap. I do not fall into patterns that feel too clean. If this account ever reaches someone else, then enough time has passed that it may not matter. Or maybe it does. Either way, this is all I will say. The operation was real. The order was real. And the reason behind it was not fear of the public. It was fear of being heard. I am older now. Not just in years. In how I measure quiet. In how I listen to spaces before I trust them. The Army taught me many things, but that operation taught me the most lasting lesson of all. Not everything dangerous moves fast or looks hostile. Some threats wait. They listen. They learn who you are by how you move through the world. I do not think about the mountain every day anymore. That took time. At first, it followed me everywhere. In sleep, in still rooms, in the space between one breath and the next. Now it comes back only when the world goes too quiet, when patterns line up too clean, when sound settles into something steady and patient. When that happens, I break it without thinking. I shift my weight. I clear my throat. I turn on a light. Small acts. Human acts. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if we had never been sent, if the place would have stayed contained, or if it would have grown anyway, fed by workers who thought they were studying echoes and pressure instead of something that pushed back. That question has no answer that helps. Soldiers live with unanswered things. We learn to carry them without letting them decide who we become. The men I lost stay with me in quiet ways. Not as faces frozen in fear, but as habits. The way I check corners. The way I count steps without meaning to. The way I keep moving when standing still feels wrong. They deserve that much. They deserve to be remembered in the only way that matters, by staying alive myself. I was ordered not to discuss the operation. I followed that order for years. I am still following it in spirit. I am not sharing details that would point someone back to that ridge or that door. I am not giving a map. I am giving a warning, soft and simple. Some places are built to hold more than concrete and steel. Some things respond when noticed. If you ever find yourself somewhere that feels too quiet, where sound behaves wrong and the air smells like cold metal, trust that feeling. Leave. Do not test it. Do not try to understand it. Listening is not always passive. Sometimes it is an invitation. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And for more amazing horror stories, just click the one showing right now on your screen.